Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Go Local News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in as we kick off our evening coverage here on Election Day. I'd like to welcome my first guest into the studio, Colonel Brendan Doherty, former superintendent of the state police, former congressional candidate. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
I appreciate your coming in to kick off this evening here, and I kind of want to go sequentially about your career from law enforcement into politics, and then we'll even go into 2018. But let's go back to the state police days. We were just talking in the green room about some famous names in the news as of late. So tell folks the number of years and sort of, what really marked your tenure in the state police.
Yeah, I came on the state police in 1980 and retired in 2004 and went to Roger Williams University. I was employed by Roger Williams University, Health and Environmental and Public Safety, and a couple of years later, Governor Kucheri asked me to come back to be the state police superintendent. And then the legislature passed a bill making the state police superintendent the commissioner of public safety. So I was the first commissioner of public safety for the state. So that included a variety of departments like Capitol Police and sheriffs and the Grants Administration Office and several others. Fire marshals. So it was a lot of responsibility, and I enjoyed it. It was an honor to be the superintendent of the state police. I love the state police. I love what they represent for the people of the state of Rhode Island. And but through my career, in between being a young trooper and superintendent, I worked as a detective in the organized crime unit, and I ran the public corruption unit. And the public corruption in Rhode Island at the time, there was never a dull moment. And an organized crime back then. So,
what do folks ask you most now when they catch you on the street or they see you out at a restaurant and they, want to talk about the state police days?
Well, one thing they ask me is, are you going to run again someday? So I have to navigate through that. But people ask me if I ever saw mobsters like Raymond Petrarca Sr. or something like that, because I was a young detective at the time, and I had obviously met the former boss of the New England La Cosa Nostra, Raymond Petrarca. We put him in jail, and then he died, and his son, Raymond Jr., took over. So that's what I did, and we monitored mob activity and murder, extortion, and a variety of crimes that those fellows commit. So I don't know if you want any more of those stories. My wife says that I can ruin someone's meal quick in telling my stories, so I try not to do that.
Is there any that you want to share? And I do have to ask, Go Local had published the Patriarcha papers, the
Yeah, that was very interesting.
But did anything surprise you, or was this everything that
No, there was some things that surprised me, because sometimes we would glean intelligence from a source, and because we conducted wiretaps and whatnot, and used grand jury information, source information, informants, and then I would read some of those reports that date back even 20 years before I started in the intelligence unit, and it's sometimes put names together, and it's interesting, but those days are gone.
So talk with us about the move into politics and the decision process that you went through when you decided to run for Congress in 2012.
I stayed out of politics while I was in the state police, because there's no place for politics when you're an investigator, especially in the public corruption unit. So, but I had an interest in some things that I saw as superintendent of the state police, and wanted to. I was really committed and passionate about trying to make a difference. So I did run, and I ran for U.S. Congress in 2012. It was an interesting time. I worked hard, but I lost that election to then Congressman David Cicilline. He was actually the mayor of Providence a couple of years before. Then I think it was his second race. I put a lot into it, but he beat me fair and square.
So when you got into it and folks were like, you have to run, we really want you to run, was it what you expected, or was it way more than that?
Well, we could talk for hours about what I expected. I expected a little more love when I first started. But actually, my wife made a good point. Some people, when I retired from the state police, it was kind of a high-profile situation. There were a few articles about it, and I was in a restaurant that next week, and there were 6 seniors there. And I could see that they were trying to figure out if that was me, and I turned around and I introduced myself, and they all hugged me, and we hope you run for office. And my wife, I never forgot this, my wife made a good point. She said, if you announce you're running for office, first of all, she said, oh, you enjoyed that, didn't you? I said, yeah, it's nice to be liked, right? So she said, but if you run, when people figure out, you know, what side you're running on or what your positions are, 3 of them won't like you, and 3 of them will still love you. So that was actually a good lesson, because that's the way it turned out.
And were you prepared for that? I mean, here we are again, 2018, but 2012, you know, social media was fairly far along.
Yeah.
I mean, your wife warned you about the half and half not liking, but you know, folks really talk about the difficulties of running for office and really the complexities, and especially in social media.
Social media. So I had what I knew I had to do, and I knew I could do it well, is raise money. And I raised a couple $1 million, and so I could hire someone to take care of my social media, because I surely was not good at it. But that was it. It was a matter of raising money and getting your message out. But my opponent at the time was, again, Congressman Cicilline. He stayed on message the whole time, and I was all over the place with my message, and he stayed on message. I remember thinking, that's a boring message, but he stayed on message, and he won, and he beat me fair and square. I have no compunction about anything. I was proud of how hard I worked, but it didn't work.
So when you talk about staying on message, is that if you could have done things a little differently, that sort of Monday morning quarterback when you think back? Yeah,
so because of that, I learned, and when I see commercials today or advertisements like in Go Local, I see the messaging, and these folks that get advice from their consultants or whatever, and it's just repetitive messaging, and that's the whole race. And being able to, for a candidate to start up, and they need to be able to raise money, they need to be able to understand the issues, obviously, and get their message out there. So it's not an easy game, but it's. I respect anyone who enters that forum, because it's we want to see the best for Rhode Island. We want to see the best candidates, not just Rhode Island, anywhere in the country. We want to see the best candidates attracted to those positions.
So let's fast forward. Here we are. It is election night. We'll be getting results in hopefully short order when polls close at 8 o'clock. Let's talk about this past election cycle and election year. And let's even start on the GOP side of things. We saw a very tumultuous rift within the party following the victory of Alan Fung in the primary.
Yeah.
Patricia Morgan deciding to endorse Joe Trillo. I mean, as you're sitting back, you know, not in the fray per se, I mean, what's been your reaction to all of this?
Well, there's a lot of inside baseball there, right? So that goes back a long way. Patricia Morgan's a nice lady. Joe Trillo's a nice guy. Alan Fung's a nice guy, but there's obviously some discourse there, and they split the party. They split the vote, and they split their interests. So that has really created waves in the Republican Party. But that's politics, and it's been an interesting race. This is exciting, because it comes down to there's 5 Democratic candidates. I mean, 5 candidates, right? So there's Gina Raimondo, Joe Trillo, and Alan Fung, and then there's a couple of others.
Moderate and
independent candidates. Yes, all due respect to them. I want to include them. They're working hard too.
Did you see the video of the independent candidate apparently wearing?
I did. It was very interesting. Very, very interesting.
He has not said who is that person in the video, and of course we've reported on that here. Let's back up even a little bit, Brendan, to 2016 and the election of President Donald Trump. Did you see that coming?
No, I didn't. I'd like to be able to take credit for predicting that, but no, I didn't. It's been an interesting time for this country. I mean, there's people that this is the problem with politics, is we have no one that's in the middle anymore to find common ground. We have, it's either people love the president or they loathe the president, right?
There's no ambivalency.
Yeah, no, and you know it's tough. I was with I've always taken pride in the fact that I can solve problems by sitting down and finding common ground with people, and you might have to give a little to take a little, but people right now they're either on one side or the other, and that's it. So I was with a fellow the other night. He was telling me this guy was just he's so pro he's right wing, and he's dictating to me the way the world should be, and he's a good guy, and he's a friend, and I was just surprised that he's like overcome with this. And then 10 minutes later, I met another friend who they're not friends, they don't even know each other, but this guy was just so to the left, and it just would never. And I thought, if I ever put those guys together, we wouldn't even be able to have lunch. They'd argue all the entire time. So I think that's what's wrong with Washington today, and sometimes it's the lobbyists that infiltrate these campaigns, and I shouldn't say infiltrate, but influence these.
Infiltrate's not a bad word. Influence, yes.
Yeah, so that's where we are. And here in Rhode Island, we have, that was quite a primary between Morgan and Fung, and now at the end we had Joe Trillo. It's going to be an interesting night tonight. It really is.
It certainly will. We're going to be keeping, again, an eye on the poll results and talking about, the divisiveness, obviously not just here in Rhode Island, but nationally. We've talked with various pundits, especially, the immigration issue per se. It's like, will this country ever be able to, depending on obviously the makeup of Congress and the administration, but both sides seem to do well with keeping their positions entrenched on immigration. Having been in law enforcement and knowing the issue well, are we ever going to be able to really tackle this?
I hope we can, because it's certainly the message we've been, the argument is so strong on both sides. But again, if we were able to bring people together in Congress, just a team of maybe 6 members of Congress, maybe they could find common ground. Because the message now is that we have folks that are coming over from other countries, and what some of our listening audience might not realize is we have blended families, and these are people who have been here for several years now. They have children and whatnot. When I was running for office, I used to say, because some people want. When I was running, people were trying to get me to embrace or espouse an idea of everyone needs to be deported if they're here illegally. And I would try to convince them that will never, ever happen. It just won't happen. So we need to come to an agreement in Congress to find a solution for this and comprehensive immigration reform. But one side wants to blame the other. This has been going on for many, many years.
No, this problem did not just certainly start today. And let's talk about a moderate candidate. Take a Bob Flanders, if you will. He's given to Democrats. He's given to Republicans. He's talked about bipartisanship. Obviously a very steep battle against Sheldon Whitehouse. Is he just behind the 8 ball with the R next to his name in the current environment?
Well, that's a great question, because the answer is he's got an uphill battle, and there's only a couple of hours left in that uphill battle, because it comes down to about 350,000 registered Democrats. I know I'm off by maybe 10,000 or whatever, but and about 90,000 or 100,000 registered Republicans, and the rest, correct me if I'm wrong, there's somewhere like 350,000 unaffiliated, what some people like to call that independents. But what I learned a few years ago is a lot of most of those independents or unaffiliates are D-leaning independents. Their mom and dad were Democrats.
They're not R-leaning independents.
Exactly. There's not a lot of R-leaning independents. Right. Good. So the position I took was, well, all you need to do is win all those independents. Well, you know what? What I learned in Washington, my trips in Washington, is on Election Day, a lot of those folks come home. They come home to where their parents were. So that's the uphill battle. But Sheldon Whitehouse, a great political leader, and Bob Flanders is a great guy, and I wish them well.
I'm going to tack back a little bit, with maybe both hats on, both the political and the law enforcement hat. It's 2018 here, seen many states legalize marijuana. What do you foresee here in Rhode Island? We have a pretty conservatively controlled legislature, and the governor has some leanings both ways. Do you envision this anytime soon, legalization in Rhode Island?
I don't know. When it was an issue whether we needed medicinal marijuana, I think people realized that other states it's worked, and some folks that get a prescription for medicinal marijuana, it's able to alleviate the pain. Who would we be to judge someone who has cancer? The position I've always taken is, if somebody wants to smoke marijuana all day long, if they have cancer and they have a prescription for it, so be it. Hopefully that helps their pain. But this other issue is decriminalizing or legalizing marijuana. So what does that mean? People can walk down the street smoking a joint? I mean, I'm not a proponent of that. I don't support that. But I know other states have, and I know that's a job for our legislature. Right?
As you sit back and have
yeah,
both
it's
hats
nice to be able to sit back and watch these things now.
What else have you been watching?
There are issues that need to be addressed. Like, for example, the test for driving while intoxicated. There's not a test for marijuana. So there's a blood test, but I think that there's just some complications that need to be addressed before the legislature continues to address that.
And how big, obviously, we know from what we see in the news here, but, marijuana aside, the opioid crisis as well.
It's huge. It's terrible.
And, all states are continuing to battle this, and plenty of folks here on the ground working to combat it. I mean, can we turn the corner on the opioid crisis?
I think we can. I think that education is a big piece. It's really, there's so many task force that have started up, and groups that have tried to educate our teens on it. It's just been an ongoing problem for many years, and it's gotten worse in the last few years, and the stories are horrible. It doesn't. I've said that in the past when I've had to talk to groups about opioids. It's not the folks who get addicted are not the person that years past that we would picture as a drug addict, if you would. These are some of these folks end up hooked on a prescription drug as a result of an injury, and they're on oxycodone or something, and they're taken off that drug, and then they go to street drugs, and it's a sad situation. But I think we need to keep addressing and keep fighting that fight. I know law enforcement has. Our political leaders have obtained grants to help the community in addressing it, studying it, and parents need to really keep a close eye on their kids. It's a horrible situation.
Well, I had to ask you again from the law enforcement, some key issues of the day here. But coming back to the day here, and coming back and sort of maybe a broad question to sort of culminate the interview here. Obviously, especially the race for governor and the race for mayor is really hinged on what these politicians and candidates have said is really the state of Rhode Island. You have the governor touting a strong and stronger economy, but you have challengers saying that it's a stronger economy just for some, that there's huge tax breaks given to big business to come into Rhode Island. So really a clash of political ideology, of course, if you will, but at the end of the day, we've been in the polls with John Dellavope. We've seen how Rhode Islanders think about where we're at. But I mean, where do you see the state of Rhode Island right now? Is it stronger? Could it be stronger?
Well, it could always be stronger, right? So whatever we're doing, we could always improve. But I think that the state is in pretty good shape right now. As far as the unemployment rate, I like to see that people are working, people that want to go to work, they're out there and they're finding jobs. I know that there's some employers are having trouble finding matching skill sets, and that's something we need to keep working on. I know that the governor, Gina Raimondo, has touted that. But I think, look, maybe I'm biased. I love this state. I think it's the greatest little state in the country. But we can always do better. And I think some people get a little negative and say, "Oh, only in Rhode Island." Well, go to New Jersey for a little while, or go to Pennsylvania. And I mean, there's some issues there. I mean, I remember having these discussions with some folks that you don't want to just be negative, and let's be positive. This is a great state where I think we're doing well. We'll see what tomorrow brings. At the time of this taping, we've got close to 300,000 people who voted. It's raining from here to South County, so people are energized, right? They're out there. Whether it's President Trump has energized them to get out to vote for his ideas or vote against his ideas, I don't know. But there's about 300,000 people have voted so far, just under that. So this is an exciting day. It's an exciting time in Providence. Look, we've got Dee Dee Whitman and Mayor Elorza. That's quite a clash. We'll see what happens tonight. I think it's a great race. She's has run a good race.
Speaking of politics, earlier today we had former campaign consultant Spencer Sullivan Skype from DC, and he said to say hi, which leads me to my question. You say people ask you all the time, will Brendan Doherty consider running for office again in the future?
That's a great question. I enjoyed running. I enjoyed traveling from Woonsocket to Newport to Westerly, even though Westerly wasn't part of the district I was running in. But there's a lot of folks out there talking about running next time. I know that I think that you could see somebody like Patrick Lynch come back to run again. That's just my opinion.
He certainly has a war chest.
He certainly does. But it's something I would definitely consider running as a Democrat.
Very interesting. Well, Colonel Brendan Doherty, I appreciate your taking the time to come in here to the studio as we kick off election coverage here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We'll be back in a little bit as polls come to a close, probably about 7:45, 8-ish, with a great lineup here, so be sure to tune in back on Go Local Live. We look forward